In tonight's video, we're going to be listening to several park ranger encounter stories. From the mysterious to the unknown to the terrifying and dangerous. Prepare yourselves to go deep in the woods. Story 1. The Black Wolf. I've worked extensively as a ranger in Arizona for well over 20 years now. I've spent countless hours on the trails in the backcountry and along rivers, and I've seen many things, both good and bad. You see, I'm not a big believer in Bigfoot or any other cryptid creature, but I am very open to the possibility that they exist. In fact, right now, I'm living in Arizona, right near Tucson, but spent most of my life growing up near Flagstaff. My family has been living here for well about 200 years now. My story is not one of seeing a Dogman creature, but rather an encounter of what I believe was a large black wolf. Not sure if it was actually a werewolf, but I'll explain to you. This happened a while out hiking alone. All this happened right near the Mogollon Rim Trail System. I should note that the trail system is very extensive and covers thousands of acres between Williams, Arizona and Show Low, Arizona. There are literally hundreds of miles worth of trails throughout this wilderness area, stretching from north to south along Highway 89A, through very dense pine forest as well as scrub brush desert terrain. Now, it was right around after 11 p.m. when I decided to go for an evening hike. I guess you could call it more of a midnight hike, since it had rained earlier that day and there wouldn't be much foot traffic on these remote hills, especially since it was at night. Even though it had rained and was muddy, the weather was clear with only some slight clouds overhead, which would occasionally block out any moonlight, which made visibility difficult. However, I was up for the challenge. I had a flashlight that I was armed with. I figured that would provide enough ample lighting. As already mentioned, this particular incident occurred during my hike along several different sections and trails within this larger trail system, including Sunset Trailhead, Red Rock Trailhead, Spruce Grove Loop, and Forest Lakes Road, etc. I think you get where I'm going here. Anyway, after hiking several miles into these thick woods by myself without seeing another soul all night long, which isn't exactly uncommon, something began following me up ahead, somewhere off into the distance behind thick bushy trees and bushes just off the trail, about maybe 50 yards. And that's when I got the impression that I thought I was being stalked. At first, I assumed somebody else must be out here with me tonight too, and I realized how quiet everything seemed. It was unnatural. I thought maybe there was just a deer or elk moving around, so I stopped briefly to listen more closely, hoping perhaps I'll hear some sort of animal noise like maybe branches breaking or something, but nothing. Just complete silence, followed by the footsteps, and then the heavy breathing sounds came. Deep inside, just beyond the thicket. Whatever it was, I'm telling you this now, sounded huge, because every time it took one step forward, it inhaled deeply, making these loud breathing sounds like its lungs must have been massive. Now, this went on for nearly 10 minutes, until whatever it was moved away further, deeper into those woods, and never returned again, at least while I was present. I could have sworn that several times during that same hike, I kept seeing the dark silhouette of a very, very large wolf, and could not shake the impression that whatever this wolf was following me, potentially stalking me like prey. But there is some inconsistencies, because when whatever it was moving towards me and breathing heavily, it sounded more like a man, and even the thudding and walking around did not sound like something on four legs, but rather on two, judging by the memory of the footsteps and the sounds it was making. Perhaps there was two separate things I was dealing with. Perhaps it was all the same, which is my guess. I quickly retreated back home, and the following morning decided to venture out again to see if I can find any evidence of the night before. Well, wouldn't you know it, because it was muddy the night before, I found these incredibly massive canine prints in the mud in several different spots, and you guessed it, they all looked to be about bipedal, if I had to guess. I'll try and send you those pictures here shortly, since I took several. Even though I'm only half native, I worry that this wasn't a werewolf, but much more a skinwalker, or some sort of evil witch tracking me, since my family has a history of dabbling in that sort of thing. But not my father nor I. We've always stayed on the clean side of the family. But there are times that I feel like the dark past of my family's history always tries to reach back out and pull me close. So, is this a mere coincidence, or was there something really stalking me that night? During my time as a ranger and also just exploring out and about, I have found interesting, similar encounters involving other mysterious creatures lurking through Arizona's vast wilderness. I also know others who have experienced similar things while hiking alone at dusk and nighttime in the surrounding areas, and especially Oak Creek Canyon vicinity. And even though this occurred to me, I still have a really hard time wrapping my brain around the concept of a real-life living Bigfoot or Dogman. Call me foolish, but I just can't comprehend it. Story 2. The White Spider. I'm a park ranger here in Tennessee, and I've had an encounter with something I simply can't explain. For the sake of this email, I'll refer to myself as John. I work at the Obed Wild and Scenic River. To give you a little more background, it's a heavily wooded area west of Tennessee, just south of the Cumberland Plateau. You see, I'm a lifelong outdoorsman. I've never been afraid of anything in nature, really, so when this happened, it's really shaken me up. You see, I was working at the Obed on July 1st, 2017. We were having an event there with the public to celebrate Independence Day. As it then became night, I decided to leave work early, because I really needed some rest before going out again. Now, as soon as my shift had ended, I got into my truck, which was my Ford F-150, and drove down one of our old fire roads toward Caney Bottom Trailhead. After driving for about 10 minutes on this road, which is mostly just dirt and gravel surface, something had grabbed my attention in my rearview mirror. It was something I was not used to seeing. In my headlights, yeah, but this was a pair of yellow eyes that appeared to be glowing in the darkness behind me. I stopped immediately because whatever it was began walking toward my vehicle from behind. And what didn't make sense is there were no lights, other than my tailgate lights. I see no reason why these eyes should have been glowing as bright as they did. You see, with deer or many other wildlife, a bright light has to hit their eyes to get the reflection. That's how it works, so this was not quite that, and was part of the reason I was so spooked right off the bat. But it was moving towards my vehicle at an accelerated rate. It was moving very quickly and appeared to walk out from some of the underbrush on the trees onto the road, maybe about 50 feet away from where I was. Now this thing, as it got closer, I could make out more, and appeared to have huge hands and legs. It kind of reminded me of a giant spider in which the way it kind of crawled across the dirt. As it went from crouching and crawling like a spider would, it quickly got near my vehicle, standing up on two legs, and was easily over 6 feet tall, with its very thin hair covering its body. But not like fur, it was more like human hair, just very light and fuzzy. Without even hesitating for 1 second, I drew my firearm and pointed it directly at this thing's face, which, by the way, was horribly misfigured and disgusting looking, and it immediately froze in its tracks, like it knew what a firearm was, and it didn't seem threatening at all. It just appeared curious if I had to come up with an explanation. And after I kept my firearm on it, it slowly backed away, dropped back down to all fours, and did this disturbing spider crawl back into the woods, scurrying off very quickly. And the second it disappeared off in the darkness, this intense wave of nausea overcame me, and I began retching all over the ground. I've never had something like that happen before. It wasn't out of fear, because I've been terrified before, and even though this was technically scary, it was very manageable. But I was just more curious and disturbed by what this thing was. Something to also note about this encounter is that for about 3 or 4 days after this experience, I would randomly get bouts of pounding headaches, the worst migraines I've ever had, and it's not in my genetic makeup to have headaches or migraines. In fact, before this, I couldn't even tell you one major migraine I ever had, but this was like something otherworldly, like my head had been beat by a brick or something. I could not even begin to describe to you the excruciating pain I was in during these frequent migraines, and then, after about 45 minutes, they would suddenly disappear just as soon as they came on, and after about day 4, they suddenly stopped. I'm not sure what started the onset of these, but it's interesting to think that as soon as I saw that thing, I got the nausea and then I got the migraines. Perhaps some radioactivity or something. I mean, maybe it was a mutant. I know that's a pretty crazy theory, but I'm just looking for any answers I can. After sharing my story to a couple of my close friends, one of them, who's been hunting near here since 2011, has also told me he's seen some strange things lurking around the scenic area. In fact, one time, right near the Laurel Falls area late at night while deer hunting several years back, my friend claims that he saw a creature that was similar, all white, very lanky, actually attack a doe, ripping it to shreds in front of him, completely ignoring that he was only a few yards away, watching this whole thing in front of him. My friend, completely spooked by it, took off running the other direction and never told a soul. Well, until I told my story, of course. I really try and do my best to keep my mouth shut of these strange paranormal occurrences because the general public just laughs, but I do tell people who have open ears and are willing to accept there's more to life than what we know. I hope this story finds you well, and blessings to you. Story 3. The Man in the Mountains. I hope you're interested in this one. I've been working in the woods since about 1973. I'm a foreman, and I've been all over the United States. In fact, I worked in Oregon for roughly 10 years, and I know this state very well. So do my coworkers. We've had some very strange things happen to us. I've seen some things I simply can't explain. And I've worked in the woods nearly all my life, and when you're out there every day, it's natural that you would see and hear things that just don't make sense. You know what it's like. You're out there every day too. You see, I'm not a BFRO member or any other organization. I don't even really read much on the internet. So my coworkers and I just began talking about it, what we've seen and heard over the years. So here goes with my own sighting. We were working in Mount Jefferson Wilderness area in Oregon in December of 2007, just before Christmas actually. We were doing some work at one of our campsites that we use for fire season when we get ready to leave at home after Christmas break. It was around 6 or 7 p.m., dark by now, so we had our headlamps on, and the entire time, we had been hearing strange noises all evening long coming from way up high in the timber above us, but thought that maybe it was simply a cougar or something we could explain. Perhaps a cougar trying to kill an elk or something because there were no snow yet and you can't climb up into these big trees without snow cover to hide their tracks, so they'd have to wait until winter before they could hunt effectively again. Anyway, as time went by, these noises began to get louder and then stopped completely, as if whatever it was knew we were there, and then very quickly came down off the mountains right towards us. This thing sounded like a herd of cattle running full bore right through those woods. It would run fast for a while and then stop dead silent only seconds later to start running again. All night long, this thing ran back and forth across those mountains, making these loud growling sounds and stomping, along with heavy breathing. My boss, who has been working out here his whole life, said he has never heard anything sound quite like he heard that night. He said he didn't know what made it, but whatever it was scared him more than anything else out there did. When my coworker first saw it, she screamed and saw its face looking back at her from near our tent trailer. She did not tell us this right away. In fact, she actually waited the following morning and explained in vivid detail just how horrifying it looked. Now, I should also say that me and my boss and coworkers never really bought into the idea of a Bigfoot exactly, but this has definitely got us thinking. You know, I've always known there are things living wild and free in these forests, besides animals like bears and cougars, but never once thought about Bigfoot could be them until my friend showed me several videos like this last year and really opened my eyes to the possibilities of things living out there in the woods far beyond our comprehension. Thank you for allowing me to share my experiences. Story 4. The Unexplainable. I work with the Forest Service at the New Jersey State Park. I encountered some strange occurrences on October 5th, 2017. In fact, this was roughly right around 9:30 p.m. in the evening while patrolling Crossing Historic Park in Bucks County. I was walking down a path that is closed off to vehicles and pedestrians at the time due to some flooding. And that's when I heard what sounded like someone or something beating on an oil drum. I mean, it was very loud and abrasive, coming from, I'd say, roughly 150 feet away from me through some trees. And what I also noticed right off the bat is as soon as this began, all the wildlife around me completely ceased. This includes any crickets, any birds, anything that would even amount to wildlife noise was suddenly stopped. And this noise turned into more of a drone. I want to reiterate here that it wasn't exactly an oil drum being smacked on, but that's the closest I can make the noise out to be. Ignoring my inner gut instincts, I figured it was just somebody maybe having a good time, so I whipped out my flashlight and began shining it into the area where I had heard it coming from. And after a little bit, I noticed what appeared to be two larger oval-shaped eyes staring back at me from maybe 50 feet away across from the river. And even though I was shining my light, the light did not extend far enough to illuminate whatever they were attached to. But I can tell you this, they were high up and set far enough apart that whatever had them could easily see between them without straining its neck. This is almost when I began to wonder if this was a ploy tactic to draw me in, because as soon as I made eye contact, or what I assume was eye contact, because I know for a fact this thing was looking at me, there was other noise around me. And I knew in that moment that whatever I was looking at was not a normal animal you could simply write off. This was something else entirely. And the noise I heard coming from around me was almost surrounding me, like I was about to be flanked by something. While the movements weren't sudden exactly, I had enough time to back my way out and get my way back to safety before something worse could have happened. And that's exactly what I did. And the entire time, keep in mind, by the way, the night stayed completely quiet, and whatever was following me stayed just beyond the reach of the tree line. I kept looking back, shutting my light, but never seeing anything. Even though I could hear strange noises coming from behind me, following me all the way up to the timberline. And I could have sworn that at various points all throughout retreating, I heard a strange chittering. If I had to explain it further, it almost kind of reminded me of somebody speaking a foreign language really quickly. Possibly like Vietnamese or Chinese is kind of what it reminded me of. But the whole time that I'm retreating back, the oil sounds, or the oil drum beating, whatever you want to call it, had completely stopped. And I'm not sure what brought that on or what, but it was somewhat like a war drum, somewhat like a strange bio noise. Like a heartbeat amplified times 100, if that makes any sense. It was all so very strange, and even now as I recount this to you, I understand how ridiculous it sounds. But keep in mind that this is also why I am reporting this to you anonymously, because I do not want to hurt my authenticity or my career. And I will say this, that I've had many strange run-ins with beings like this before, and this is just one of them. I've actually had a handful that were far more violent than this one, and I believe this one was more of an intimidation factor by whatever or whoever they were to try and drive me out of the area. All in all, to this day, I simply cannot explain what happened to me out there and what it was that I experienced. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, be sure to subscribe, like, leave a comment down below, and stay tuned for more stories just like these.